My name is Victoria, and I am 22 years old. The day I received my acceptance letter to Stanford University with a full scholarship should have been the greatest moment of my life. After months of secretly applying, studying for the SATs, and crafting essays that showcased my passion for mechanical engineering, I held in my hands a document worth over $200,000. My heart was racing as I read the words, "Congratulations" and "full ride scholarship" in the same sentence. I rushed downstairs to share this incredible news with my family, expecting tears of joy and celebration. Instead, my father, Douglas, looked at the letter with cold disapproval, while my mother, Catherine, immediately started talking about how Stanford was too far from home. Before I tell you how my parents tried to destroy my dreams and how I fought back, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and make sure to subscribe, because this story will show you exactly what happens when family love becomes family control. Growing up in our modest two-story house in Columbus, Ohio, I always knew my family operated by unwritten rules that seemed to benefit everyone except me. My father, Douglas, was 54 years old and had worked as a bank manager at the same local branch for over 25 years. He was the kind of man who believed stability meant never taking risks, never venturing too far from what was familiar and comfortable. My mother, Catherine, was 51 and taught third grade at the elementary school, just 2 miles from our house, a job she had held since before I was born. Our family dynamic had always centered around one core belief that my parents repeated like a mantra: family comes first, and that means staying close to home. My younger brother, Andrew, who was 19, had followed this philosophy perfectly by enrolling in the local community college where he was majoring in business administration. He lived at home, worked part-time at the same bank where our father was employed, and never questioned the boundaries our parents had established for our lives. The expectation for me had been equally clear from an early age. As the daughter, I was supposed to choose a practical major like education or nursing, attend Ohio State University, which was close enough for weekend visits home, and eventually settle down with a nice local boy to raise my own family within a 50-mile radius of where I was born. This path had been laid out for me so consistently and with such certainty that my parents genuinely believed I shared their vision for my future. But I had always been different from the rest of my family in ways that became more apparent as I grew older. While Andrew was content with average grades and following predetermined paths, I excelled in mathematics and science classes that challenged me to think critically and solve complex problems. My physics teacher, Mr. Harold Chen, recognized my potential early on and encouraged me to consider engineering programs at top universities. He would stay after school to work with me on advanced problem sets, and often commented that my analytical thinking reminded him of his own engineering background. The more I learned about mechanical engineering, the more passionate I became about pursuing it as a career. I spent hours watching YouTube videos about cutting-edge technology, reading articles about innovations in renewable energy, and dreaming about contributing to solutions for climate change and sustainable development. When I shared these interests with my parents, however, their response was always the same dismissive refrain: girls do not need to go far from home for education, and there are plenty of good programs right here in Ohio. Throughout my junior and senior years of high school, the pressure to conform to my parents' expectations intensified significantly. They would make comments about how Stanford and other prestigious universities were only for rich kids who did not understand the value of family loyalty. They insisted that staying close to home was not just practical, but morally superior, as if choosing to pursue opportunities elsewhere was a betrayal of everything they had taught me about family values. Despite this constant discouragement, I began secretly researching top engineering programs across the country. I discovered that Stanford University had one of the most innovative mechanical engineering departments in the world, with professors conducting groundbreaking research in robotics, clean energy, and sustainable design. The more I learned about their program, the more convinced I became that this was where I belonged, where I could develop the skills and knowledge to make a meaningful contribution to solving the world's most pressing technological challenges. The application process became my secret project throughout senior year. I worked extra shifts at my part-time job at the local grocery store to pay application fees, spent countless hours crafting essays that expressed my genuine passion for engineering, and studied relentlessly for the SAT to achieve scores that would make me competitive for admission. Every piece of correspondence with Stanford admissions was carefully hidden. Every deadline met without my parents' knowledge, every hope and dream kept locked away from their disapproving judgment. The letter arrived on a crisp Tuesday afternoon in March, delivered in a thick envelope that immediately made my heart start racing. I had been checking the mail obsessively for weeks, always making sure to get home before my parents, so I could intercept any correspondence from Stanford. When I saw the university logo in the corner and felt the weight of multiple documents inside, I knew before opening it that this was the moment that would either validate all my secret efforts or confirm my parents' belief that I was reaching too high. Standing in our small foyer with trembling hands, I carefully opened the envelope and pulled out the acceptance letter. The words seemed to leap off the page. "We are delighted to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the Stanford Merit Scholarship, which covers full tuition room board and books for 4 years. The total value of the package was listed as just over $200,000, an amount that represented more money than my family had ever possessed at one time. I read the letter 3 times before the reality fully sank in. Not only had I been accepted to one of the most prestigious engineering programs in the country, but they were offering me a completely free education worth more than most people's homes. This scholarship meant I could pursue my dreams without burdening my family financially, that I could study alongside the brightest minds in my field, and that doors would open for me that I had only dared to imagine. The excitement was so overwhelming that I actually laughed out loud right there in the hallway, clutching the letter to my chest and spinning around like a little kid who had just been told Christmas was coming early. For the first time in my life, I felt truly proud of an achievement that belonged entirely to me, something I had earned through my own hard work and determination rather than simply meeting someone else's expectations. When my parents came home from work that evening, I could barely contain myself through our usual dinner routine of discussing Andrew's classes and my father's day at the bank. Finally, as my mother was clearing the dishes, I announced that I had some incredible news to share with the family. I pulled out the Stanford letter with ceremonial flourish, expecting to see their faces light up with the same joy and pride I was feeling. Instead, the reaction was like a bucket of ice water being thrown over my celebration. My father, Douglas, read the letter with a deepening frown, while my mother, Catherine, immediately started shaking her head and making worried clucking sounds. Andrew looked back and forth between our parents and me, clearly sensing the tension, but not understanding why such amazing news was being received with such obvious displeasure. "We never gave permission for you to apply to Stanford," my father said, in the cold, controlled voice he used when he was truly angry. "This scholarship offer is meaningless because you will not be accepting it. You applied to this university without discussing it with your family, which shows exactly the kind of impulsive, irresponsible thinking that proves you are not ready for such a demanding environment." My mother joined the criticism immediately, her voice taking on that particular tone of disappointed concern that she had perfected over years of teaching young children. "Stanford is 3,000 miles away from home, Victoria. You have never even spent a week away from family, and now you think you can handle living on the opposite coast in one of the most competitive academic environments in the world. You are simply too fragile for that kind of pressure and independence. The word fragile hit me like a physical blow because it encapsulated everything my parents had always believed about me, despite all evidence to the contrary. I had maintained a 4.0 grade point average while working part-time had never given them any reason to doubt my responsibility or maturity, and had just proven my academic capabilities by earning admissions to one of the most selective universities in the world. Yet they still saw me as fragile as someone who needed their protection rather than their encouragement. In the days following my announcement about Stanford, my parents launched what I now recognize as a carefully orchestrated campaign of psychological manipulation, designed to convince me that accepting the scholarship would be a terrible mistake. They did not forbid me outright at first, instead choosing to use subtler tactics that they probably believed were more loving and persuasive than direct commands. My mother, Catherine, began every conversation with worried questions about my ability to handle the academic pressure at such a competitive institution. She would bring up news stories about college students experiencing mental health crises, suicide rates at prestigious universities, and the cutthroat nature of engineering programs. "What if you get homesick and cannot concentrate on your studies?" she would ask, with genuine concern in her voice. "What if the other students are so brilliant that you feel inadequate and lose confidence in yourself?" My father, Douglas, took a different approach, focusing on what he called the moral and practical implications of my potential decision. He talked constantly about family loyalty and responsibility, suggesting that choosing Stanford would be tantamount to abandoning everyone who had supported me throughout my childhood. Family comes first. "Victoria," he would remind me during every meal, "your place is here with the people who love you and have sacrificed for you. Going to California shows a selfish disregard for the values we have tried to instill in you." Initially, I tried to counter their arguments with logical explanations about the incredible opportunities that Stanford would provide for my career and future earning potential. I researched the university's engineering program extensively, printing out articles about their faculty, their research projects, and the career outcomes of their graduates. I prepared what amounted to a formal presentation showing how a Stanford education would position me for success in ways that staying in Ohio simply could not match. But every piece of evidence I presented was dismissed or reframed as further proof that I was being naive and impractical. When I showed them statistics about Stanford engineering graduates' starting salaries, my father said that money was not everything and that I was being materialistic. When I explained the cutting-edge research opportunities available to undergraduates, my mother worried that I was setting myself up for disappointment if I could not keep up with such advanced work. The most frustrating aspect of these conversations was how my parents managed to make their opposition sound like loving concern rather than controlling behavior. They never said I was not smart enough or capable enough for Stanford. Instead, they expressed worry about my emotional well-being, my ability to handle being so far from home, and whether such an intense academic environment would be too stressful for someone of my supposedly delicate constitution. After 2 weeks of these daily discussions that went nowhere, my father escalated his tactics significantly. During what I thought was going to be another routine conversation about my future, he delivered an ultimatum that revealed the true nature of his position. "If you choose to go to Stanford," he said with cold finality, "you will be choosing to abandon this family. We will not support your decision financially, emotionally, or otherwise. You will be on your own completely, and you will not be welcome to come crawling back when you realize you have made a terrible mistake." My mother immediately began crying, adding her own emotional manipulation to my father's threats. "How can you hurt us like this?" she asked through her tears. After everything we have done for you, after all the love and support we have given you, how can you even consider leaving us behind for some fantasy about being an engineer? Do our feelings and our family bonds mean nothing to you? It was in this moment that I finally understood what was really happening. This was not about their concern for my well-being or their desire to protect me from potential failure. This was about control, about their need to keep me within the boundaries they had established for my life, regardless of my own dreams and capabilities. They were not trying to save me from making a mistake. They were trying to save themselves from losing control over my choices. What happened next would change everything about my relationship with my parents and my understanding of what family love actually means. 3 days after my father's ultimatum about cutting me off financially and emotionally, I discovered that he had taken his efforts to sabotage my future to a level that I never could have imagined possible from someone who claimed to love me unconditionally. I was in my bedroom working on homework when I heard my father talking on the phone in his study downstairs. Something about his tone made me curious enough to creep to the top of the stairs, where I could hear his conversation more clearly. What I heard made my blood run cold and shattered any remaining illusions I had about my parents' motivations. He was speaking to someone at Stanford University, and he was lying about me with such casual ease that it took my breath away. "Yes, this is Douglas Martinez calling about my daughter Victoria's scholarship offer," he was saying, in his most professional bank manager voice. "I need to inform you that Victoria has had some serious family emergencies come up, and she will not be able to accept your scholarship or attend Stanford in the fall. Please remove her from your incoming class and offer her scholarship to another deserving student." I listened in horror as my father essentially stole my future right out from under me, using his authority as my parent to make decisions about my life without my knowledge or consent. He was not content to simply pressure me into declining the scholarship myself. He was actively working behind my back to eliminate the opportunity, entirely making it impossible for me to change my mind, even if I found the courage to defy his wishes. The moment he hung up the phone, I rushed downstairs and confronted him directly. I had heard enough of the conversation to know exactly what he had done, and I was too angry and shocked to worry about the consequences of challenging him openly. "You called Stanford and told them I could not attend," I said, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "You pretended to speak for me and gave away my scholarship without my permission." My father did not even have the grace to look ashamed or apologetic. Instead, he doubled down on his actions with the kind of righteous conviction that comes from believing you are always right, regardless of the evidence. "I saved you from making a terrible decision that would have ruined your life and torn apart our family," he replied calmly. "You will thank me for this someday when you realize how much heartache and failure I have spared you." But I was not willing to accept this betrayal quietly. I immediately called Stanford myself, reaching the admissions office and explaining that there had been a terrible misunderstanding. I spoke with Janet Thompson, the Associate Director of Admissions, who listened patiently as I explained the situation with my controlling parents and assured her that I absolutely wanted to accept the scholarship and attend Stanford in the fall. Janet was incredibly understanding and professional about the entire situation. She told me that they had unfortunately encountered similar cases of parental interference before, and that my scholarship offer was still valid as long as I could confirm my acceptance within the next 2 weeks. However, she also warned me that if my parents were actively working against my education, I would need to be prepared to handle all aspects of enrollment and preparation completely on my own. This conversation with Janet Thompson became the turning point that crystallized my understanding of what I needed to do. My parents were not going to support my dreams or respect my autonomy, no matter how much evidence I provided about my capabilities or the value of this opportunity. If I wanted to pursue the future I had worked so hard to earn, I was going to have to take complete control of my own life, even if it meant breaking away from my family entirely. Over the next few days, I began secretly planning what I now think of as my great escape from parental control. I researched student loans and work-study programs that could help me cover living expenses until the scholarship funds became available. I contacted the housing office at Stanford to arrange dormitory accommodations and started making lists of everything I would need to bring with me to California. The planning phase of my escape from my parents' control required a level of secrecy and strategic thinking that I had never needed to employ before in my life. Every conversation had to be carefully managed to avoid revealing my true intentions. Every online search had to be conducted when I was certain no one else was around, and every piece of correspondence with Stanford had to be hidden from parents who were now actively monitoring my activities for signs of rebellion. My most trusted ally during this period became Maria Santos, my best friend since middle school, who understood my situation better than anyone else in my life. Maria had watched my parents' controlling behavior for years and had often commented that their version of love felt more like imprisonment than support. When I told her about my father's call to Stanford and my decision to attend university regardless of their wishes, she immediately offered to help in any way possible. The biggest challenge was figuring out transportation to California and temporary housing until I could get settled in the dormitories. My parents had already confiscated my car keys and were restricting my access to family vehicles, claiming that I could not be trusted with such responsibilities while I was in such a defiant and irrational state of mind. They had also begun monitoring my cell phone usage and internet activity, making it difficult to communicate with Stanford or make necessary arrangements. Maria became my secret communication channel and logistical coordinator. She used her own phone and computer to handle correspondence with the university housing office, researched bus routes from Ohio to California, and even offered to lend me money from her college savings account to cover transportation and initial living expenses. Her parents, who had always been supportive of my academic achievements, quietly approved of her assistance and made their home available as a safe space where I could make phone calls and use their computer without my parents' knowledge. During this planning period, my relationship with my parents deteriorated rapidly as they sensed my growing determination to pursue Stanford despite their objections. My father, Douglas, began treating me like a hostile enemy rather than his daughter, scrutinizing my every move and interpreting normal teenage behavior as signs of dangerous rebellion. He would search my room regularly for evidence of continued communication with Stanford, interrogate me about my whereabouts whenever I left the house, and lecture me daily about the consequences of defying parental authority. My mother, Catherine, took a different but equally destructive approach, alternating between tearful guilt trips and cold, emotional withdrawal. She would spend hours telling me how heartbroken she was, that I would even consider leaving the family, how my decision was destroying her mental health and causing her to lose sleep and weight from worry. Then she would suddenly become distant and formal, treating me like an ungrateful stranger who had forfeited the right to maternal love and support. The atmosphere in our house became so toxic and oppressive that even my brother Andrew began to notice the change, though he was too intimidated by our parents' anger to offer me any direct support. He would give me sympathetic looks across the dinner table and occasionally slip me encouraging notes, but he was not willing to risk his own standing in the family by openly defending my right to make independent choices about my education and future. 2 weeks before my planned departure, my parents discovered enough evidence of my continued planning to realize that I had not abandoned my Stanford dreams as they had assumed. My father found printouts of dormitory information that I had accidentally left in my backpack, and my mother noticed charges on her credit card from a bus ticket website where I had been researching travel options. Their response was swift and dramatic. They essentially placed me under house arrest, confiscating my cell phone, restricting my internet access, and forbidding me from leaving the house except for school and my part-time job, both of which they monitored closely. They told me that these measures were necessary to protect me from making a decision that would ruin my life and destroy our family bonds forever. This is not love, I realized with perfect clarity as I sat in my bedroom that had essentially become a prison cell. This is control disguised as concern, manipulation disguised as protection. Parents who truly loved me would want me to pursue opportunities that could help me reach my full potential, even if those opportunities required some sacrifice and risk. The night I executed my escape plan was one of the most terrifying and exhilarating experiences of my entire life. I had been waiting for the perfect opportunity when my parents would both be in deep sleep and unlikely to check on me before morning. That opportunity came on a Tuesday night in late July when my father had worked a particularly long day at the bank and my mother had taken sleeping medication for a headache she had been nursing all evening. I had packed a single backpack with essential clothing, important documents, and a few personal items that held special meaning for me. Everything else would have to be left behind, sacrificed, for the chance to pursue my education and independence. The backpack contained my birth certificate, social security card, high school transcripts, and the acceptance letter from Stanford that had started this entire conflict with my family. Around 2 a.m, I carefully opened my bedroom window and climbed out onto the small roof section that extended over our front porch. From there, I was able to climb down using the sturdy trellis that my mother had installed years earlier for her climbing roses. Every step had to be silent and deliberate, as any noise could wake my parents and bring my escape plan to an immediate and catastrophic end. Maria was waiting for me at the corner of our street in her older brother's car, which she had borrowed with a cover story about needing to pick up a friend who was having car trouble. The moment I climbed into the passenger seat, I felt a mixture of terror and relief that was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I was officially on my own, completely responsible for my own future, with no safety net except my own determination and the kindness of friends who believed in my dreams. The drive to the Greyhound station took 20 minutes through the quiet streets of Columbus at 3 a.m. Maria and I barely spoke during the journey, both of us understanding the magnitude of what was happening and the uncertainty that lay ahead. She had helped me purchase a bus ticket to San Francisco using cash from my part-time job savings, ensuring that there would be no credit card trail for my parents to follow when they discovered my absence. At the bus station, Maria hugged me tightly and made me promise to call her as soon as I arrived safely at Stanford. She pressed an envelope into my hands containing $300 that she had withdrawn from her own savings account, insisting that I would need emergency money for food and incidental expenses during my first few days in California. The generosity and loyalty of this friendship meant more to me in that moment than all the conditional love my parents had withdrawn when I refused to comply with their demands. The bus ride to California took 2.5 days, with stops in major cities across the country, where I caught glimpses of the broader world that existed beyond the boundaries my parents had tried to establish for my life. During those long hours of travel, I had plenty of time to think about what I was doing and whether I was making the right choice. There were moments of doubt and homesickness, particularly when I imagined my parents discovering my empty room and realizing that I had actually followed through on my threat to leave. But every time I considered turning back, I reminded myself of how they had tried to sabotage my scholarship opportunity and how they had treated my dreams as threats to be eliminated rather than goals to be supported. I thought about the mechanical engineering program waiting for me at Stanford, the professors who were conducting research that could help solve climate change, and the career possibilities that could open up if I had the courage to see this journey through to its conclusion. When the bus finally pulled into the San Francisco station, I felt like I was arriving in a completely different world from the small, controlled environment I had known in Ohio. The city was enormous and diverse and filled with energy that seemed to pulse through the streets and buildings. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by strangers who knew nothing about my family situation or my parents' expectations for my future. I was completely anonymous and completely free. My first week at Stanford University was a masterclass in independence resourcefulness and the reality of what it means to be completely responsible for your own survival. I arrived on campus with my single backpack, $300 in cash from Maria, and a determination that far exceeded my practical preparation for living alone in one of the most expensive areas of the country. The housing office had arranged temporary accommodations in a dormitory that would not officially open for new students for another 10 days. This meant I was essentially camping in an empty building with minimal furnishing and no meal plan or cafeteria access. My first few nights were spent sleeping on a bare mattress, with clothes from my backpack serving as both pillow and blanket, eating vending machine snacks, and whatever cheap food I could find at nearby convenience stores. Despite the physical discomfort and uncertainty, I felt more alive and hopeful than I had in months. Every challenge I successfully navigated without my parents' help was proof that their assessment of me as too fragile and dependent had been completely wrong. I was not only surviving on my own, but I was problem-solving and adapting in ways that demonstrated exactly the kind of resilience and maturity that would serve me well throughout my college experience. My first priority was securing some form of immediate income to stretch my limited cash reserves until financial aid and work-study funds became available. The Campus Career Center helped me find a position in the university library, shelving books, and assisting with basic administrative tasks for $12 per hour. It was not glamorous work, but it provided enough income to cover basic necessities while allowing me to maintain focus on my primary goal of academic success. The work-study job also gave me access to computer terminals and internet connectivity that I needed to complete enrollment procedures and communicate with various university offices about my unusual financial situation. As someone who had arrived without parental support or involvement, I had to navigate every aspect of college preparation independently, from arranging meal plans, to understanding health insurance requirements, to completing paperwork for student loans. Meanwhile, back in Ohio, my parents had discovered my disappearance and were not handling the situation with grace or understanding. My phone, which I had left behind to avoid being tracked, was apparently receiving dozens of angry and worried messages from both my mother and father. Maria kept me updated on their reactions through our secret communication channels, reporting that they were alternating between fury at my defiance and panic about my safety and well-being. According to Maria, my father Douglas had initially threatened to call the police and report me as a runaway until he realized that I was legally an adult and therefore entitled to make my own decisions about where to live and what to do with my life. My mother, Catherine, was apparently spending most of her time crying and telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned the family and broken her heart by choosing strangers at a university over the people who had loved and supported me my entire life. The most hurtful part of their reaction was how they framed my decision to pursue my education as a selfish betrayal rather than a natural step toward adulthood and independence. Even Andrew, who had initially been sympathetic to my situation, was now sending messages through Maria, expressing disappointment that I had left without saying goodbye, and concern that I was making a terrible mistake that would end in failure and regret. But as my first semester began, and I started attending actual classes in mechanical engineering, all doubts about my decision evaporated completely. The coursework was challenging, in exactly the way I had hoped, requiring the kind of analytical thinking and problem-solving skills that I had been developing throughout high school. My professors were world-class researchers who brought cutting-edge knowledge and real-world applications into every lecture and laboratory session. Even more importantly, I was surrounded by classmates who shared my passion for engineering and my excitement about using technology to solve meaningful problems. These were students from all over the world who had come to Stanford specifically because of its reputation for innovation and academic excellence. For the first time in my life, I was not the weird kid who was too interested in math and science. I was part of a community where intellectual curiosity and ambitious goals were celebrated rather than viewed with suspicion. By the end of my first semester, I had not only survived my parents' abandonment and my own financial challenges, but I was thriving academically and personally in ways that would not have been possible if I had stayed in Ohio and accepted their limitations on my potential. The validation of my decision to choose Stanford over my parents' approval came in waves throughout my college experience. Each semester bringing new evidence that I had been right to trust my own judgment about what I needed for my future. My academic performance exceeded even my own expectations, with grades that consistently placed me in the top 10% of my engineering cohort, and recognition from professors who appreciated my analytical skills and creative problem-solving approaches. During my first summer break, I was selected for a competitive internship program at Google's headquarters in Mountain View, working alongside senior engineers on projects related to sustainable technology and renewable energy systems. The internship not only provided valuable real-world experience in my field, but also came with a stipend that significantly improved my financial situation and reduced my dependence on student loans for basic living expenses. The Google experience was transformative in ways that went far beyond the technical skills I developed during those 3 months. I was working with some of the brightest minds in the technology industry, contributing to projects that had the potential to impact millions of people around the world. My supervisors consistently praised my work ethic, innovative thinking, and ability to collaborate effectively with diverse teams of engineers and researchers. More importantly, the internship connected me with a network of professionals who became mentors and advocates for my career development. These were successful engineers who had followed paths similar to the one I was pursuing, and they offered advice, encouragement, and opportunities that simply would not have been available to me if I had stayed in Ohio and accepted a more conventional educational route. When I returned to Stanford for my sophomore year, I was invited to join a research project led by Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the most respected professors in the mechanical engineering department. The research focused on developing more efficient solar panel designs that could make renewable energy accessible to communities in developing countries. Working on this project gave me hands-on experience with cutting-edge technology, while also fulfilling my desire to use engineering skills to address global challenges. The research opportunity led to my first published academic paper, with my name listed as a co-author, alongside Dr. Chen and several graduate students. Seeing my work cited in other research publications, and knowing that my contributions were advancing scientific knowledge in a meaningful way, provided a sense of accomplishment and purpose that I had never experienced before. By my junior year, I had been elected to leadership positions in several engineering organizations on campus, including serving as vice president of the Society of Women Engineers chapter at Stanford. These roles allowed me to mentor younger students who were facing their own challenges in pursuing engineering careers, particularly those who were dealing with family pressure or financial obstacles similar to what I had experienced. The leadership experience also enhanced my communication and project management skills in ways that complemented my technical engineering education. I learned how to run meetings, organize events, manage budgets, and motivate teams of volunteers to work toward common goals. These soft skills proved to be just as valuable as my technical knowledge when it came time to interview for internships and full-time positions. During my senior year, I received multiple job offers from major technology companies, including Apple, Microsoft, and Tesla. The starting salary offers ranged from $85,000 to $95,000 annually, which represented more money than my father had ever earned in his highest-paid year as a bank manager. The irony was not lost on me that by pursuing the path my parents had tried to prevent, I had achieved a level of financial success and career stability that far exceeded anything they could have provided through their more conventional approach. I ultimately accepted the position at Apple working as a mechanical engineer on their product design team, with a focus on developing more sustainable manufacturing processes and materials. The job came with excellent benefits, opportunities for advancement, and the chance to work on products that would be used by millions of people around the world. As I prepared to graduate magna cum laude from one of the most prestigious engineering programs in the country, I reflected on how different my life had become from what my parents had envisioned for me. Instead of staying close to home and following a safe, predictable path, I had built a career that was both personally fulfilling and financially rewarding, surrounded by colleagues who respected my skills and contributions. 5 years have passed since I graduated from Stanford and began my career at Apple, and I can now look back on my decision to defy my parents' control with the perspective that comes from having lived with the consequences of that choice for an extended period. Today, I am 27 years old, working as a senior mechanical engineer with a team of talented professionals who are developing the next generation of sustainable technology products. My financial situation has stabilized in ways that would have been impossible if I had followed the path my parents had mapped out for me. I own my own apartment in San Francisco, have substantial savings for the first time in my adult life, and am able to support myself completely without any assistance from family or anyone else. More importantly, I wake up every morning excited about the work I am doing and confident that my career is aligned with my values and long-term goals. The personal growth that has resulted from choosing independence over compliance has been just as significant as the professional achievements. Living on my own from age 22 forced me to develop self-reliance, problem-solving skills, and emotional resilience that I might never have discovered if I had remained within my parents' protective but limiting environment. I learned that I was far stronger and more capable than they had ever given me credit for, and that their assessment of me as too fragile for challenging environments had been completely inaccurate. My relationship with my family has evolved in complex ways over these 5 years, though it has never returned to the closeness we had before the Stanford conflict. My parents made several attempts at reconciliation during my first few years in California, usually around major holidays or my birthday, when they would call or send letters expressing regret about how our disagreement had damaged our family bonds. However, their version of reconciliation always came with the implicit expectation that I should acknowledge having been wrong about Stanford and grateful that they had tried to protect me from making a mistake. They seemed to believe that my success was somehow accidental or temporary, and that eventually I would realize the wisdom of their original advice about staying close to home and choosing a more conventional path. Andrew, my younger brother, has been the most supportive family member throughout this period, though his support has always been cautious and limited by his desire to maintain good relationships with our parents. He moved to California 2 years ago, inspired by my example to think beyond the boundaries our parents had established for our lives. He is now working for a startup company in Silicon Valley and has told me privately that watching my success gave him the courage to pursue opportunities he never would have considered otherwise. Through Andrew, I have learned that our parents still talk about me regularly, alternating between pride in my professional achievements and sadness about what they see as the loss of family closeness. According to him, they have never fully accepted responsibility for their role in creating the conflict that led to my departure, instead framing the situation as an unfortunate misunderstanding that got out of hand rather than a fundamental disagreement about control versus independence. I have maintained limited contact with my parents over the years, usually consisting of brief phone calls on holidays and occasional visits when I return to Ohio for Andrew's important events. These interactions are polite but distant, lacking the warmth and intimacy that characterized our relationship before they tried to sabotage my scholarship opportunity. I have forgiven them for their actions, but I have not forgotten the lessons I learned about the difference between love that supports growth and control that masquerades as protection. The most valuable insight from this entire experience has been understanding that sometimes the people who love you most are also the people who are least capable of seeing your full potential or supporting your biggest dreams. My parents genuinely believed they were acting in my best interests when they tried to prevent me from attending Stanford, but their fear-based approach to parenting ultimately did more harm than good. Through therapy and personal reflection, I have come to understand that their controlling behavior was rooted in their own limitations and fears rather than any accurate assessment of my capabilities or needs. They had never taken the kinds of risks or pursued the kinds of opportunities that I was seeking, so they projected their own anxieties and insecurities onto my situation, rather than recognizing that I might be capable of succeeding where they would have struggled. This understanding has helped me develop compassion for their perspective, while also maintaining firm boundaries about what role they can play in my adult life. I no longer need their approval or validation to feel confident about my choices, but I also do not need to punish them indefinitely for their mistakes. We have found a way to maintain family relationships that are cordial, if not deeply intimate, based on mutual respect for each other's autonomy and different approaches to life. Looking toward the future, I am excited about the possibility of starting my own family someday with my partner Marcus, who is also an engineer and shares my values about supporting individual growth and pursuing ambitious goals. If we have children, I am committed to being the kind of parent who encourages their dreams rather than limiting them, who sees their potential rather than their vulnerability, and who prepares them for independence rather than dependence. The scholarship to Stanford that started this entire conflict has proven to be worth far more than the $200,000 in tuition and expenses it covered. It gave me access to an education, a career, and a life that has exceeded every expectation I had when I first opened that acceptance letter in my parents' foyer 5 years ago. Most importantly, it taught me that sometimes you have to be willing to disappoint the people you love in order to become the person you are meant to be. That lesson has shaped every major decision I have made since leaving home, and it continues to guide me as I build a life that is authentic to my own values and dreams, rather than limited by other people's fears and expectations. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and pursuing your own dreams? What would you do if your parents tried to sabotage an opportunity that could change your entire future? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how to balance family loyalty with personal growth and independence. If this story inspired you to think about your own goals and the people who support or limit your potential, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family obstacles and choosing your own path. Share this video with anyone who might need encouragement to pursue their dreams despite opposition from the people closest to them. Thank you for listening to my journey from family control to personal freedom and success. Remember that your dreams are valid regardless of who believes in them, and that sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself and your family is having the courage to become who you are truly meant to be, even when that path requires leaving familiar territory behind.